thank you for attending this excellent panel that we're hosting here in Greek House Davos, our second conference. We're getting larger every time. And we're very happy that we have here with us today Mr. Hans-Paul Brueckner, Managing Director at Global Boston Consulting Group, Mr. Jerry Kalogiratos, CEO at Capital Gaseous Management Group, and the chairwoman of Greek House Davos, Miss Irene Vantaraki. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, and it's definitely a pleasure to be here in Davos. So I understand the idea is to discuss about global leadership and sustainable financing going forward. And it's a very important juncture where we stand today, and both are going to be needed. So if you look at the capital that will be required in order to meet the 2050 net zero targets, it has been estimated about 9.2 billion, including capex and consumer spending. Sorry, did I say billion? Yes, indeed, trillion. So this is going to be a huge amount of capital that will require definitely a lot of support in terms of sustainability financing, but also leaders that will be able to deploy that capital in an effective way. Maybe I should stop here and in order to get a dialogue going and see where this takes us, right?
First of all, thank you all that you are here. I'm very happy that Greek House is for second time running, and me and my team were very proud, and of course our supporters, because without our supporters we could not be here. So one of the main, I believe one of the main tasks for a leadership is in order to have good supporting system in order to be a good leader. It's a very difficult task to be a leader, and the most of decisions are very difficult and hard for the people are around you, and they are engaged on your task. So this is a story of leadership, of how I create Greek House Davos as an idea that came up 2020. And it took a lot of hard work. It took a lot of due diligence with my country, which they honor me to trust me from the first time I put up my idea. And of course, it took a lot of hard work, due diligence with the World Economic Forum and the stakeholders here in Davos to give us the stage. The stage is a world stage, which Greece, I believe, has to be at the moment. One of the main, I would say, skill for leadership is to take the right time, the right decision. I believe it was the right time and the right decision to bring Greece and Greek entrepreneurship in Davos. Greece at the moment has all what it needs to be global. First of all, we have a brilliant soft power, which at the moment is needed globally. I believe that leadership has to do also with soft power, first of all, and after all, about the skills and education and whatever it needs to run all the economics and the technical decision has a leader to take. So this is a small brief that I can bring in the table of how we are here now. A little deep thought, but maybe it's a good thought, good food for thought.
Well, thanks very much for having me here. First of all, I would like to congratulate Greece of having been elected the country of the year by The Economist last year. Well done, you know. And who would have expected this 5 years ago or even 10 years ago? So I think that's also a great sign of leadership. Now, I think we're all struggling a bit to get this topic of green financing and leadership together, you know, quite honestly. But I think what is really important is, and I think we see this in Greece, but across Europe and across many countries around the world, to say we want to get to net zero, you know, until 2045, 50, 60, 70, depending on the stage of development of countries. And of course, if it's, you know, very far in the future, like 30, 40, 50 years, you know, if you make a commitment, you don't have to deliver, you know. But if you have to deliver by 25, you know, certain milestones, if you have to deliver by 2030, this is not that far away. And so I think it takes courage, but it takes a lot of persistence and the ability to get things done. And so, I mean, everywhere you go these days, you know, they complain there's no leadership in Europe, there's no leadership around the world. That's why we have all these problems. I mean, I would respectfully disagree. I mean, you know, we have good leaders and we have not so good leaders, you know, somewhere in the world. And we had this 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years ago and so forth. But I think going back to green financing and so forth and reaching our targets, I think, of course, it needs a lot of money, you know, trillions of dollars over the next 30, 40, 50 years. But, you know, very often, actually, it's not the financing that is the big problem, but it's the regulation, the struggle with vested interests, and you know, the existing institutions. Very often, the power companies today are government-owned or semi-government-owned, and so you know, the same is true for the grid, government-owned, semi-government-owned, which means, you know, why would you like to mess things up with having windcraft, with having solar, with having decentralized, you know, power generation and so forth, and that makes life really difficult. And it's true, you know, that the same Greens who are demanding green power are also preventing windcraft to be installed in Germany, for example, because they worry about the birds, or they worry about the landscape. They even, you know, sometimes try to prevent solar panels on roofs because they do worry about, you know, the picture that, you know, when people look at the, you know, the houses or in a region or a village or town or whatever. And it's not just Germany. I mean, all over Europe, all over the world, you know, installing windcraft takes, if it's very fast, 5 years, normally 7, 8 years on average. I mean, that's quite a challenge. So, you know, I think one of the key elements is to really accelerate the process. I just had a discussion this morning about, you know, how do you, for example, help in certain countries, you know, in South Africa, for example, you know, and there the coal-fired power plants provide employment. The coal mines provide employment. If you shut them down and replace them by green energy, you increase unemployment, and unemployment is already very high. So it's politically very, very tough. So I think it's not just a simple issue of financing and then you work on. You have to see the massive ramifications this has for whole societies, and that's why I think, you know, country by country, region by region, you know, what we need to ensure is that we accelerate the implementation and making sure that we take maybe not everybody along, because that may be impossible, but a large majority of people along so that they benefit. Because the cost of windcraft, the cost of solar panels, and of solar energy has really come down over the years after many years and actually decades of subsidies by quite a number of governments. And now it's economically viable. Now we have to get it done. And I think accelerating the process of investment, making sure that we remove the obstacles, the many obstacles through government regulations, zoning, and I think will be really critical. And obviously, I mean, Greece with its wonderful shore, lots of sun, I mean, is ideally placed, you know, to benefit from that, and could be a big exporter of energy to the rest of Europe and to the rest of the region.
Well, I think that you're touching upon a very important aspect of what is in store over the next few years. Because as you say, it's not just the money, right? First of all, who has access to this money? While most of that spending needs to be done by developed countries, there is inequality in access. Developing countries have less access to what we like to call sustainable financing. More importantly, and this is what I find very often in our industry, and our business is shipping. Shipping is one of the key industries in Greece. We control about a quarter of the global fleet. It's a bit of an odd thing, such a small country controlling the fates, if you want, of international trade. But if anything, Greek shipping has grown quite a bit over the years. It has modernized. So today we have surpassed the Japanese in terms of LNG shipping. We are the largest owners of tankers and dry bulk in the world, and at the top position in terms of container shipping. So when it comes to shipping and transportation, a lot actually happens out of Athens, out of Greece, where ship owners have managed to face the challenges and the volatility of the market over the years, and not only that, but become very successful and accumulate market share. So, but shipping in the end is, while it is an industry that flourishes in Greece, it is a global transportation industry. And among others, it's responsible for 3% of global emissions. If you think that over 90% of goods is transported with ships, it's still a very efficient way, even environmentally, to transport goods. But we have to do what we have to do in terms of reducing our carbon footprint. And I will tell you a very personal story. It was only 4 years ago that we were looking at a very large order of dual-fuel ships. We were literally pioneers in this segment. I won't disclose the details, and you'll understand why. And we had everything in place, contracts, specifications, really at the top end, and it would be a step to reduce carbon emissions compared to a conventional ship by a material percentage. First, we go to a major European bank that has sustainable financing as one of its top priorities. And the reaction was, yes, that's very interesting. It actually fits with our sustainable financing goals. But because the technology is not that tested, we would like to see steeper amortization. And then we go to our, let's say, to the end user, an energy company, and they said, "Oh, that's very interesting. So this, we are willing to pay you for, let's say, the energy savings that you provide, but as far as the carbon emissions abatement, you know, we don't care for that." But for us, and this is the same problem that every company faces, be it in shipping or otherwise, it meant that in order to take the greener option, we had a higher capex. So this is exactly where theoretically sustainable financing comes in. This is exactly where you need all these targets that are set by companies to come together and be able to deliver. But instead, it proved that many of them are more in theory, and when it comes to reality, yes, sustainable financing might mean 5-10 basis points less on the cost of debt, but this is not. But you are being asked to pay otherwise. So I think when it comes to leadership, what every CEO can do as a private company is limited. You can set your targets. You can find the ways to invest and deploy money. You can put a project together. But the way that I think the leadership that is needed today is leadership at the global or at least the supranational level. The recent step of the European Union to include shipping, for example, in ETS, the emissions trading system, is the right step forward. So unless you give people market-based measures that really incentivize green investment, to use the generic term, so that motives and incentives are clearly set out, sustainable financing will still be, and sustainable investments in many industries which are hard to abate when it comes to carbon emissions, and long-haul transportation, aviation, and some other industries are among them. This is not just simply buying an electric car and plugging it into the wall, right? I mean, you cannot do that with ships. You need the batteries that you need will be heavier than the ship. So you need actually to incentivize people, and this requires leadership at a global level. The EU is at the forefront, but for example, the IMO, which is our, let's say, supranational organization, it's a UN organization that looks at the regulatory side of shipping globally, has been coy of taking these important steps forward. So I think that's where we need the leadership, actual leadership that will incentivize all actors to do the right thing.
Can I just follow up on that? Sorry, if I may. I think obviously you're right. I think it's not just electricity. It is shipping, but it's also steel. It's cement plants. It's refineries. And there, it's not so trivial. You cannot just exchange, coal-fired power plants with lots of windcraft mills. That's not doable, and that will be a bigger challenge. Now, what we found at BCG is that for almost all steel plants, cement plants, refineries, and so forth, you can really optimize the process through better use of data and technology, and reduce resource requirements by 10, 15, 20, sometimes even 25%. So I think there's lots to do. Still, there are emissions. Everybody talks about green steel. That will eventually come, but it will take quite a while, and it will require subsidies and government subsidies. Now, we always talk about global leadership, and I think if we wait for everybody to agree, it will be very difficult, because the current status of the various countries is very different. I mean, you cannot require in India, where many people still don't have any power to really say, please stop your emissions, so that we will not see the increase. I mean, India already produces more CO2 emissions than the whole of Europe together. Of course, it's more than twice as many people. But I think what is really important is to say, country by country, region by region, or certainly in Europe, the EU will move together, and through certain border taxes, make sure that this does not come to the disadvantage of the European entities. But I think we cannot squeeze India or African countries or Latin American countries into the same straitjacket. I think we need to be careful and thoughtful. And what is important is that we find a path together, so that yes, Europe may make it by 2045, and then China by 2060 and India by 2070 to get to net zero, or maybe even faster. As we learn over the next several years and decades, I'm sure new technologies will come up which we don't even consider now, and then we'll have more opportunities, and that will also provide maybe more opportunities also for India, not to become net zero by 2070, but maybe by 2060 or even earlier. But I think the important thing is getting together, talking about the common objectives, and then how do we get there, and then be very persistent in following up and meeting our milestones.
Well, you cover me because it was the question I was about to say, and I was thinking is how much the world that is struggling to survive in Africa, and people that they don't have even toilet, they are out of their houses. There are people that very poor countries. How much they are related with net zero conversation, and you just mentioned of. I believe it's a big part of the global that they are not at all related with this conversation because they have more serious problems to solve.
I think the answer is very clear. They are not. They are not related to this. I mean, for them, they are at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of meeting their needs, and it's about food, it's about housing, it's about health and shelter and education, and these are the primary concerns. And then afterwards, you can talk about net zero emissions, and I think we just have to respect that also. But we also have to help them. As of course they need energy for all these, for shelter, for education, for healthcare, for food. They need also power and energy and resources. So we need to help them make it work in the best resource-efficient way.
Though the important thing is that climate change is expected to hit at mostly exactly those areas where we have lower per capita incomes. So it is the responsibility of developed nations that have had the advantage and the benefit of global emissions so far to make sure that either with greenhouse emissions abatement technologies, or even with improvements that will resist climate change, will support the countries that are going to be worst hit, which unfortunately coincide with the lower per capita incomes. So absolutely, there have to be subsidies, and the burden falls on the developed world to make this happen. No doubt about it.
But of course, on the other hand, we also need to be careful not to say, I tell you exactly what to do. I mean, we are talking, we cannot say, we know better than you do, and we tell you, exactly what you have to do. I think, but also just, transferring money will also not do the trick. So, I think, and I don't have the answer, quite honestly, and I'm not sure whether anybody has the answers, but I think it will be a very tricky path and a very tricky way of working together and getting things done in a way that really helps countries in Africa, for example, or in Asia, or in South America, and ensuring that the money is really well spent.
Well, I would like to close this conversation to concentrate a little more in Greece, and I would like to talk about leadership and how Greece became one of the most, I would say, for Europe at the moment, more important country in energy. And what do you think about what is a good scenario for the next 5-10 years for Greece, becoming an energy hub and creating this energy partnership with Europe?
Greece has been fortunate enough to put infrastructure in place now for some time to let's say, reduce dependence on predominantly pipeline gas. This has been done through a major regasification and storage unit in Revithousa near Athens, but also a very mature project that is being materialized as we speak, another regasification point in northern Greece, Alexandroupolis, with an FSRU, a floating regasification unit. This, together with the pickup of renewables over the last 15 years in Greece, have meant that Greece has been in a relatively, let's say, better positions of some of its European peers when it comes to access to energy. Just last week, Greece was producing 40-45% of its peak energy requirements from renewables. Okay, we were a little lucky with the weather, I have to admit, since we had fantastic sunny days. And at the same time, we have had the ability to import LNG from Algiers, from the US, from Qatar, and to complement whatever loss there was in terms of Russian pipeline gas, which I should add has not stopped coming into Greece because it comes through another pipeline. So I think so far Greece has transformed itself and has shown that it can be a responsible player in Europe for energy. It has also the capacity, through the installation of additional renewable capacity, to become a major exporter of green energy to the rest of Europe. There is a lot of, I think the current crisis with Russia has demonstrated the need for a more developed grid as well as a pipeline system within Europe. And this is very much happening, and I think Europe is going to play a major role. I should also add that while shipping is an international business, the fact that, for example, a country like Greece owns about a quarter of the global LNG fleet is important. It doesn't mean that necessarily LNG carriers that Greek ship owners control, it's actually private companies, right, are the ones that will be bringing every cubic of LNG into Greece, or in the European Union. But I ask you this, imagine if the same fleet of ships was, for example, under Russian ownership or Chinese ownership. How would have been different? So control of the actual land pipelines as well as the floating pipelines. So I think this crisis also highlighted that transportation and maritime transportation can be also considered a strategic industry for the European Union, and it has to be, if not supported, at least we have to make sure that the right structures are in place to maintain it in a world which increasingly becomes more complex and where we have seen risks in corners where we did not expect.
Can I just ask you? Sorry. Can I just ask to add your thoughts on the gas reserves in the Mediterranean? Are there significant reserves in the Greek territory?
I'm definitely not an expert, but I can tell you the expectation is that there will be findings. There are some exploration going on right now. The progress is currently, I think, confidential, but there seem to be positive noises coming out. So the Eastern Mediterranean has proven to be a place where there are gas reserves, and we have seen it. So if we think that this is part of the greater reserve over there, we should be able to have findings. But I don't think there is yet a verdict.
Tomorrow, I invite you. We have a lot of stakeholders from Greece that they are in energy sector and in hydrocarbon. Herema, he's he's in charge of this process. So it will be very interesting to be part of the discussion tomorrow, all of us and all our friends of Greek House. We have very major guests from Greece, and the topic is tourism and energy and shipping. So we will have more outcome tomorrow from our discussion. So keep your interest on the topics, and we are come back tomorrow. Thank you. We have several. Chairmans and organizations from Greece, from energy, renewable energy. We have ministers, we have officials, many officials and organizations from Greece. You can find the agenda in our website, and it's officially published, the agenda. So thank you very much, and we keep waiting you in our program, a very interesting program about Greece and investments in Greece, and we have a very important stakeholders, partners and friends that are supporting us, and we'll be here for you. Thank you.